I just wanted to announce that the board is running late. They're still in closed session. So if I have any more updates as to when they will be here, I will let you all know.
Thanks for the update. Okay, good evening, everyone. Apologies for our delay. I am Board President Sylvia Hasai, and I am calling the regular meeting of the KPPCSD to order, and it is approximately 7:13. And I will start by asking the clerk to call the roll, and just note that if Director Deppie does not respond, he expects to be delayed this evening, but please go ahead and do call the roll.
Okay, Director Deppie is on the way. Vice President Natoli?
Here.
Director Shiras-Watt?
Here.
President Hasai?
Here. And I would like to take this opportunity to read a letter from Director Modavi. As you see, he is not here today. And today I received the following letter. Dear President Hasai, I am writing to inform you of my decision to resign my position as Director of the Kensington Police Protection and Community Services District, KPPCSD Board of Directors, effective immediately. I wish the best successes for the KPPCSD and Kensington Police Department in the future. It has been a privilege to be on the board and serve the good residents of Kensington. If I can be of any assistance during the time it will take to fill the position, please don't hesitate to ask. Best regards, Cyrus Modavi. So I would like to take this opportunity to publicly, on behalf of the districts of Kensington, first and foremost, for myself and for all the board members, to thank Director Modavi for his public service. He brought a lot of passion and energy to our board, and we really wish him all the best in his personal and professional endeavors. This item was not agendized, so we will not have discussion of it, other than to look for a time to schedule a special session to have a discussion on that item, and we will do so at some point in the agenda where it is possible to do that. We will begin with the consent calendar and public and consent calendar comments. Is there anyone who would like to comment on that and or items that are not on the agenda this evening? I will go to the attendee list.
Oh, President Hasai,
Yes.
are we going to engage the swearing in first, or has that been?
Yeah, the swearing in comes after roll call.
Apologies, I missed that in my notes and on the agenda. So yes, we will actually start.
Chief Gangas.
Yes, I apologize. So this is a great opportunity at the beginning of the meeting when we're all fresh and have as many people hopefully in attendance as possible to swear in Chief of Police Mike Gankas, who was appointed by General Manager Brown earlier this month. And certainly also I hope to wish a fond farewell and many kudos to Interim Chief Police Walt Schuld, who has been with us longer than he probably expected, but to our great benefit. So I will ask Chief of Police Walt Schuld, Interim Chief of Police Walt Schuld, to swear in Mike Gankas as our new police chief.
Thank you. So Mike, if you would come out front. So I have introduced Mike as my captain a few months ago. He is a much decorated, very experienced and well-educated police manager with over 21 years of police experience. He has commanded and has supervisory experience in virtually every field of law enforcement, including administration, investigations, community relations, traffic, and patrol. Mike has just finished a 12-month post-command college for police managers and is going to graduate later this year with a master's degree in organizational leadership. His education and experience will serve the Kensington community for years to come. Mike comes from a family of police officers. His grandfather was a police sergeant, his grandmother was a police detective, and his uncle was a police officer. With Mike today is his mother, Judy, his stepfather, Gordon, and Mike's daughter, Samantha, who will be pinning the badge on Mike. Samantha, if you come up here. You raise your right hand. I, Michael Gankas,
I, Michael Gankas,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
that I will well and faithfully
that I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties upon which I'm about to enter
discharge the duties upon which I'm about to enter
as the Chief of Police for the District of Kensington.
as the Chief of Police for the District of Kensington.
Congratulations, you've pinned the badge. Like to say something?
I would. Thank you, Chief Schuld. I'm very humbled and thankful for the opportunity I've been presented with. I would like to thank the Board of Directors and General Manager Brown for appointing me as your new chief. I'd like to thank my family, friends, and colleagues for supporting me throughout my career. I want to thank the officers, district staff members, and fire personnel for making me feel welcome in their organization since the day I came on board. And I look forward to serving the community in my capacity as your chief of police. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would like to give members of the board an opportunity to speak on behalf of themselves for wishing Chief Schuld well, as this is his last day, I believe. And tomorrow is Chief Gankaz's official first day. Anyone, I see General Manager Brown's hand is raised. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. Very quickly, I just wanted to congratulate Chief Gankaz and welcome to the team. Really looking forward to working with you. And of course, Chief Schuld, you know, it's been great working with you. It's been short and sweet, but you made my job so much easier, and you've been an incredible support in making things go as smoothly as possible during this transition and as I kind of, you know, get my feet on the ground. So thank you so much. And I wish you a happy retirement and go make us some really good wine.
I will.
Director Natoli.
Yeah, I wanted to thank Chief Schuld. I really appreciated working with you and over this past year or so. And Chief Gantz, good luck. And thank you very much for your work so far.
Thank you.
And Director Sherriswat.
Oh, thank you so much, Chief Schuld. You came in at what seemed like maybe not a calmer time, but a time that would quickly resolve itself. And here we are a year later, and maybe now just seeing the horizon. But you kept pushing the department and innovating, which was amazing. Advocating for new cars, advocating and creating the new logo. I mean, we could list all the wonderful changes you've brought to the department. We thank you, and we're anticipating that the best or one of the most wonderful additions is Chief Gankaz. So welcome, Chief Gankaz. Your reputation precedes you, and we're delighted.
I will add my thanks, and I don't think I'm speaking out of turn. I'm speaking for any of the board members who are not here right now to say thank you very much to both of you for your service to date and for laying a great foundation for us going forward. We're really super grateful for everything you've done, and expect that we will continue along with a really great team. And Director Deppie.
Oh yeah, sorry for having to miss that. I couldn't avoid it. Thank you, Chief Schuld. I guess, is it ex-chief? I don't know, still chief. And welcome to the new chief. Thank you again for all your work. Looking forward to working with you.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I did jump the gun. I apologize for that. I know that there'll be members of the public who are also extremely grateful, and those comments may come up in the public comment period. So I am now going to move to the consent calendar and public comment on items not on the agenda or on the consent calendar. I am going to find the participant list and allow the public to speak first. Okay, I have 3 hands up. I'm going to start with Maria McCauley. Hold on one moment, Maria.
I think I'm unmuted
Yes,
already.
you are.
Okay. Okay. The item that I wanted to comment on was the donation of the vehicles. Do these have to go in order? Is it okay for me to do that one now?
That's fine.
Okay. I'd like to suggest that it be reconsidered who the cars get donated to. Cars for Kids has a 1-star rating on Charity Navigator, and they have had that for years. And they have been involved in various improprieties over the years and have had some questionable practices. And they are based on the East Coast, which is where they conduct most of their operations. So to me, it doesn't just seem like that they're not a good candidate, but it seems like there are so much better candidates. For example, the Contra Costa Food Bank or the Alameda County Food Bank, especially during these times when their services are so strained. Both of those 2 examples have 4-star ratings on Charity Navigator, and they address dire needs in our very own community. So it just seems like, why not help someone in our own backyard? And they also take car donations. And I don't know, another one, everyone has their favorite charity, but another one is the Women's Cancer Resource Center in Berkeley. They take car donations. It just, I read the write-up that that Interim Chief Schultz and General Manager Brown put together, and there's actually some information in here that I think is inaccurate regarding the mission of Cars for Kids. I'm just looking at their web.
Your comments are limited to 3 minutes, and you've hit 3 minutes. So
Okay.
I think we get the message. And what I will do is I will ask for this to be addressed after we get other public comments, either by the general manager or by the chief. But if you could hold, we'll just take that comment and go through the rest of the comments first. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. The next person up would be Larry Nagel. Hold on one moment. Okay, Larry, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. I just wanted to congratulate Chief Schultz on a job very well done as interim chief of the Kensington Police Department. I'm speaking both for myself and as president of the Kensington Fire Protection District. We saw a tremendous number of very dramatic improvements in the police department under the leadership of Chief Schultz.
There you go.
And not the least of which was making some significant progress in coming up with evacuation plans and procedures in case of a catastrophe, namely a wildfire. I have not seen a level of cooperation this high between the police department and the fire department in the 12 years I've been in town. So I think it's really amazing what Chief Schold has done. I congratulate him. And I'm certainly am looking forward to working with Chief Gankas in the future. Thank you very much.
Okay. And we've got 2 more comments, and then I also need to go back and take care of a couple of items of business that I forgot to do up front. So I'll have to go back to that. But let me go ahead and let Delk speak next. Please keep your comments to 3 minutes, and you should be able to talk now, Delk. You can unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
All right. Hey, Stephen Still. My comment is something that's not on the consent calendar. Is it okay to speak now?
And it's not on the agenda, correct?
Correct. All right.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Last month, during the discussion of the audit, I asked about the removal of the restricted category from the fund balances. The auditor replied, "We believe that from the discussions we had, that fund that was there is more towards the overall aspect of what the district is doing on a continual basis. So that falls back off to unrestricted. What the district is doing on a continual basis. I don't understand that. And I wonder who was part of those discussions, because during the board meeting regarding the new reserves policy, just last August, General Counsel addressed at some length past and present legal issues regarding franchise fees. Then when a director asked if Bayview revenue should be restricted, she replied, "That's at the board's discretion. Whether you put it in the budget as restricted or non-restricted is less important than it be set aside for these purposes. Because it would be clearer, I might suggest you put it in the restricted fund. Now Bayview revenue is considered unassigned and can be used for any purpose. According to GASB 54, funds should be restricted when spending constraints are imposed by a third party, such as through state laws, regulations, or constitutional provisions. Until the state Supreme Court rules in Zolly v. Oakland, it is irresponsible of the district to think about tapping into the Bayview Fund for purposes unrelated to the exercise of the franchise." Thank you.
Thank you. And the last public comment is Gail. I assume that's Gail Feldman, but I'm not sure. I'm going to allow you to talk. Go ahead. Gail.
Yeah, hi Sylvia. Yes, thank you. This is Gail Feldman. And I just want to say that thank you, Delk, for bringing up this issue. I've raised that issue many times in the past about the Bayview funds and how they're used by the district. So I hope that will be considered by your finance folks and in the budgeting process. But what I really wanted to talk about and welcome Chief Gankas really relates to evacuation planning. And we are really well behind now in having a drill. And as you know, this past weekend, we had a red flag warning and it's only May. So we're in a lot of danger. And other jurisdictions such as Moraga and Orinda have held such drills, and we're not very far away from there. It seems to me that that should be a high priority for the summer. And I don't know how fast you can get that off the ground, but I would say that that is probably our most urgent issue, aside from figuring out how with the park district, we're going to be able to clear some of the debris and fuel load that is sitting in the park, just a time bomb for Kensington. And I don't know, people just aren't taking it seriously enough. It's the one thing that's gonna destroy our town. And I think that we really need to take it seriously to try to avoid it. But then if we can't avoid it, we need to know how to get out alive. And so I'd really appreciate some work by your board on this matter over the next couple of months. Thank you.
And I just want to clarify, by park, you mean Tilden Park, not our
Yes,
little
Tilden
Kensington
Park,
Park.
right,
Not that we don't think that's important too, but it's not the
No, that's
source
not
of-
where the full, that's not
Okay.
the fuel load there.
Okay, all right, thank you. So I see two directors' hands up, and I will let them go ahead and speak unless I'm mistaken, and those hands are not meant to be up. Directors Sherris-Watt and Directors Natoli.
I was just going to comment that one other charity is Make-A-Wish, which has has a chapter in Oakland as another organization to consider for donating the cars.
And Director Sherris-Watt.
If public comment is finished, I was going to make a motion that I pull item 3 for discussion, and separately that we approve the consent calendar. I guess items 1, 2, 4, and 5.
Is there a second for that motion?
I'll second.
Okay. So the motion is to adopt the consent calendar with the removal of item 3, which we will pull for discussion. Vice President Natoli,
Yes.
Director Deppie,
Yes.
and Director Sherris-Watt.
Yes.
I vote yes, and so the consent calendar with item 3 pulled is adopted. Now I have to apologize again for the order in which we're doing something. I skipped not allowing, but actually really inviting interim Chief Schuld on his last day with us to make a few comments, which he had asked to do, and we had put on the agenda, but I, in my typical rushed fashion, skipped. So I apologize, Chief Schuld, and would love to hear what you have to say.
Thank you. Well, I just want to start by thanking the board of directors for approving my contract and allowing me to serve the district in Kensington. I've heard many times that Kensington is a unique place, and over the last year, I've come to agree with that statement. I've enjoyed working with the board of directors in the community. The board and the residents are very engaged and only have the best interest in ensuring Kensington is successful. So I appreciated that. I have thoroughly enjoyed working with all the staff on the district side, Linnell, Catherine, Vivian, Alan, and Ann. We work well together, and they always responded when I needed assistance. I also really want to thank the Kensington Police Officers Association. They worked with me on many issues, including saving the district tens of thousands of dollars in overtime. They were very accommodating and backed me on a couple of issues that they really didn't have to. So I really appreciate the KPOA. Also, I have made it a policy over the years not to say positive things about my boss in public because it sounds so disingenuous. But since this is my last day at Kensington, I have to say that the board of directors picked an excellent general manager. I worked with a few city managers over the years and a couple very closely. Our general manager is a leader, knows what she's doing, and gives clear direction. I think she is an excellent fit for Kensington. Chief Gancas and her will make an excellent team together. Finally, I want to say that the police department has come a long way. The officers have responded very well to the multiple changes we have made, and they have actually embraced the direction the agency is going. The new hires are doing excellent. I was telling the county chiefs during our meeting that I'm very excited about the Kensington Police Department. We now have an excellent permanent chief and general manager, and KPD has improved tremendously over the last 2 years and will continue to improve with the new leadership. And I was very proud to be a part of it. So thank you all. And now I'm going to tend to my vineyard, make some wine, and spoil my wife, but not in that order. So I will now turn this over to Chief Gancas, and I will exit out gracefully. Hopefully.
And we want to have you pass along our thanks to your wife, because I know that when you came out of retirement yet again, that it wasn't quite what she was expecting, and we'll thank her as well for allowing you to make a difference here in Kensington.
I absolutely will. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So we have pulled item 3 for discussion. I think that folks have made some good points, both in a letter that we received today from Gail Feldman, as well as in particular, even more so, what Maria McCauley said today. So I would like to go ahead and invite Director Sherris-Watt, who pulled the item formally, to go ahead and discuss. And we also certainly could give either Chief Gankaz or General Manager Brown an opportunity to comment as well. But Director Saraswat, please go ahead.
Well, first, I want to thank Chief Gankaz for preparing the item. And I concur fully with the reasoning. Unfortunately, we've run into this before, that used vehicles are not worth very much. But I also agree with the community. I'm glad that you provided us with an option, Chief Gankaz. But I do share some of the community's concern. One, that Cars for Kids appears to be, and I didn't know this from listening to their jingles, that they have a religious connection, and that they are primarily located on the East Coast. So I guess I would ask that we perhaps research donating the cars to an organization that works in Contra Costa County, whether it's the food bank or some other. But otherwise, I think that we should approve the disposal of the vehicles and their donation. So, and I think that Chief Gankaz should have the authority to do that if there's an organization that he finds that meets the Contra Costa nonprofit criteria.
And non-religious, which I think would be appropriate as a public entity. Okay. Chief Gankaz, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for allowing me to speak, Board of Directors. Yes, whatever charity the Board of Directors wishes to donate a vehicle to is just fine. My experience with this is has been that it becomes cost prohibitive to try to auction off cars. I learned the hard way when I tried to auction off a few cars at my last employer, and found that the auction company invested money in the vehicles just to sell them. So when they ended up selling the cars for $400 or $500, we got a bill for $150 just to put a new battery in them, decommission the cars, which does cost money. It takes weeks to build these cars, and oftentimes several days to decommission them, remove the decals. So it does become cost prohibitive to try to auction off a 5, 7, and 10-year-old police car. We donated one vehicle at my last employer to the Contra Costa Community College Auto Shop program, and they very much appreciated it. So it doesn't matter where you donate the car. I have no preference.
I think we're investing you with that authority at this point, but I think the parameters should be located and serving Contra Costa County, non-religious, and anything else, Director Saraswat, that you wanted to, or any other director wants to direct?
It could be nonprofit, but if it's Contra Costa Community College, that sounds wonderful too. So I think we can, if it's if you deem it a fitting organization, I think the board will concur. So
and you could feel free to run that by General Manager Brown. I think she has a good sense of this as well, if you want to have another person to bounce that off with. So thanks to the public and to Director Saraswat for all that input, and to Chief Gankaz as well for sharing with us your experience and with being open to those suggestions.
Do we need to make a motion that we approve this item?
Yes, I think, go ahead, Director Saraswat, you had sort of started to do that.
Okay, I just want to make sure if we approve item 3 on the consent calendar, and with declaring that Chief Gankaz will declare certain police vehicles as surplus and approve the donation of them to an organization, a non-religious organization operating in Contra Costa County, that he deems fit.
I want to ask for a second.
I'll second.
Thank you. So it's been moved by Director Saraswat and seconded by Director Deppy. So we'll go ahead and take the roll, and I've been doing it. I'm kind of used to doing it. So for tonight, I guess I'll just keep doing it. Director Saraswat?
Yes.
Director Deppy?
Yes.
Vice President Antoli?
Yes.
And I vote yes. The motion passes 4-0. Okay. Now, our next item is a presentation which will be introduced General Manager Brown, and also will include Catherine Corsack as well, our Finance and Business Manager. So General Manager Brown, please go ahead and introduce the item.
Thank you, President Hassai and board directors. I wanted to, after the last board meeting, when we were in particular talking about potentially the staff recommendation to hire Andy Heath for some finance consulting and developing a financial forecasting model, it kind of occurred to me that maybe it would be worth revisiting kind of some of the things that the finance department has gone through over the last 2 years in particular, and sort of where things were pre-2020, where they, have come in terms of kind of right sizing some things, and in the finance department in 2020, and then, looking to the future and the things that still need to happen really to get the finance and HR department in order. Frequently in small jurisdictions like Kensington, HR is also under a finance director or administrative services director. And in this case, that's very much true. Catherine plays a key role in all sorts of HR functions. So both areas really need some additional attention. So with that, I'm going to give the presentation, and then Catherine and I are going to actually pitch it on questions and discussion with the board and the public as needed. Catherine's going to be running the PowerPoint for us. So if you want to go to the next slide, I just wanted to give that little preamble before we get started. So this first segment is to talk about past practices, and that's everything up until January 2020, what was happening in the finance department and the HR department. Next slide, please. So in finance and accounting, QuickBooks were not closed on a monthly basis, and as a result, the reporting to the public was not based on closed books. There was not a consistent process for reconciling account records, and there was no procurement policy and/or credit card policy. Next slide, please. Chart of accounts was limited. Many accounting items were assigned to just a large miscellaneous account, so there'd be a lot of money in just a single account, and which of course prevents transparency in terms of understanding exactly how and where we're spending funds. It was not possible to accurately report fund accounting. So, this still is a challenge because QuickBooks does not allow for fund balance accounting. And so that's something that this next fiscal year we're hoping to correct, but that is been an ongoing challenge. Next slide, please. I think we already touched on the chart of accounts and accurate reporting. So if we can go to the next slide. HR resources. So human resources again, pre-2020, there really was no HR process instituted. Lots of hard copying filing system only, no real central digital system. And CalPERS reporting was done mainly by hand, which of course, doing everything by hand, especially with CalPERS, which is a fairly complex reporting process, ends up resulting in a lot of corrections on a continuous basis. Next slide, please. Payroll was completed largely manually, and there was no payroll provider. Some employees' benefits were even missing, including life insurance. No employee performance evaluations or reviews were done on a consistent basis, and all sick, vacation, and compensation time was manually tracked and calculated, which of course can lead to more mistakes and oversight as well. Next slide, please. So now looking at kind of the work that's been done in 2020 in the finance department and HR. Next slide, please. Number of things, there's been quite a bit of progress. A central digital filing system was created and many files were digitized. Monthly closing of the books and reconciliation process was instituted. Expanded chart of accounts. So now there isn't just a bunch of accounts sort of dumped into a miscellaneous account. We've created more discretionary accounts and created better accounting for transparency and reporting purposes. Implemented DocuSign for electronic approval of most district documents. So there's also an electronic archival system after the fact. In human resources, next slide, please. We started accounting for all employee benefits, contracted with a payroll provider, which has been hugely helpful in saving time, staff time. and also most recently contracted with InTime for police timesheets to further automate the payroll process. The administrative support staff will be also moving to the InTime timesheet system, which will further create more efficiencies in the department as well. Next slide, please. So, looking ahead, and this is kind of the conversation really in a way that started last month with a discussion around a finance consultant. Looking ahead, next slide, please. These are some of the things that are still, remaining that need to be done. Developing financial policies in a manual, and you can see a list of examples of the kinds of policies that we really need to get into place. Refining the budget process and cycle, especially in preparation for audits, so that we can really jumpstart those and get that done no later than December of the calendar year, and really be teed up and ready to prepare the next budget. Develop short, mid, and long-term financial forecasting projections with a variety of variables and different projects and initiatives that the board might want to take on. Next slide, please. Instituting that class function in QuickBooks, which would allow for fund accounting software. Public sector, we rely on fund balances and fund accounting. That's really what we focus on in the public sector. So QuickBooks currently doesn't allow for that. And the new software application that we could kind of tack on, it's sort of an add-on to QuickBooks, would allow us to do some of that. Refine the year-end closing so that the audit can start, by August, which is kind of what we just mentioned before. Next slide, please. Continue to tighten internal controls. One of the things we really have seen is, in the past, not as much oversight and internal controls in handling cash and deposits in particular, but also in audit preparation and other financial transactions. So, with the recent audit from a new auditor for the first time for the district, we have some additional direction on internal controls that we can continue to work on. Review our procurement policy and refine those procedures. We need to really implement a fixed asset module and institute better tracking of our fixed assets, for example, in the year-end audit, and continue to refine financial reporting to the public. Next slide. In HR, efforts need to continue with developing HR policies and manual. We, for example, telecommuting, but there's other ones that we should be working on as well. Offering additional training for administrative staff, instituting annual performance evaluations and review process, and updating forms. There's a lot of forms that are outdated, including the employment application that we should be updating as well. Next slide, please. Creating checklists and policies for both hiring and termination. We currently don't really have a procedure and checklist for that, which is very standard in the HR department. Relocate all of HR information into our Paylocity software that we are using now. It would help with, has a HR management tool that would be very helpful. Creating and updating job descriptions for all positions. Not all positions currently in the district have, at least we haven't been able to find all the job descriptions for all of them, especially for administrative staff. Next slide, please. I'm sorry. Okay, so this closing slide is the benefits of additional financial consulting. And I think, you've already heard a lot in the previous slides of things that we need to do that certainly would be additional help that we could rely on from a finance consultant. But in particular, we were thinking of assessing the district's compliance with GAAP and review and making recommendations regarding our fund structure, financial reporting procedures, internal control framework, and our audit readiness process, in addition to the financial forecasting model, which is in a later agenda item. Next slide, please. So that we added at the very end, I'm not going to go through it, some glossary of terms just to make sure we're kind of all talking about the same thing, but really wanted to open it up for discussion and any questions from the board and or public. That concludes my presentation. Senate President Hassai, you're on mute.
Thank you. So I will go ahead and call on Director Sheris Watt first.
Thank you very, very much. First, I do it often, but not it would not be too much to say what an amazing job, Catherine, you've done. And thank you, Marty, too, for bringing us forward. The fact that you didn't mention a quarter at least of the wonderful things that have happened in terms of transmittal forms, in terms of the fact that bills come with the correct names, the correct location. I could go on and on, I won't. But thank you. My question is, do you have a priority list for either the board or to let us know what you want to establish and move forward first so that we can be in the loop, or you just want to inform us when we've moved on, when we've reached new milestones, how we want to do this?
Well, I think that the last slide, kind of some of the things that we would like to get to work on audit readiness and in making sure our internal controls and that we're doing, instituting best practices and standards in terms of budgeting and fund accounting is a priority that's kind of like shorter term, but Catherine every day comes up with new things that we really ought to do and need to institute. And we're going to have to work through that and prioritize it. We have not done that yet, but we do need to do it. And I think, frankly, we're going to need some help, doing it. It's not something that, we can do internally, a lot of these policies that need to be done. So I think what we ought to do is prioritize those and come back, to the board with a plan, a strategy. I also think that as Catherine and I discussed, we were hoping that, some additional direction would come out of the strategic planning process that the board hopefully will be undertaking fairly soon. I think that would be a great time for the board to also give us further direction on, kind of what they would, what you all would like to see from us in terms of priorities and recommendations.
Anything else?
I would like to make a few comments. I think as far as and I believe Marty would agree with me on this, the priorities that I see would be things that we have to do, July 1st at the start of our fiscal year. So that's only really a month and a half away. So the big things we need to do so that in 21-22, we will be able to report out by fund. We have to either start the class system in QuickBooks or, completely change softwares. I don't know that we'll be ready to change softwares by July 1st. That's not very far away, but we could implement the class function in QuickBooks and the add-on, and then, by the following year, or at least mid-year, by the quarter, we start to be able to see our accounts by funds. Another thing that there are a few things, within QuickBooks, like actually we're reconciling QuickBooks right now, but we're not using the close function in QuickBooks, it's a reconciliation function within the software that I frankly have never seen anywhere that I've ever worked. So, you always close within your software. So Jesse and I have we've been closing outside of the software because it was never done before. So she's helping, close the books, but we can't do it within the software. So we want to do that in July also. Those are a few of the things that come to mind, just that are July 1st, kind of start dates. But I believe there are probably some more things that I could come up with. So.
Okay. Director Natoli.
Oh, I just wanted to echo Director Shiras-Watt's comments on kudos to Catherine and Marty. I'm very well aware of how much work this is really saving the district in the end. But it took a lot of your time to get it to this point, and just wanted to thank you and congratulate you on a job well done.
Okay. I'll open it up. I see no more director comments. I would just go ahead and second the kudos. And one of my questions was answered, which was given the shortcomings of QuickBooks, that it looks like there's a plan to hopefully transition out of that. Do you think that if it doesn't happen by July 1st, it really can't happen during the fiscal year? I mean, I think things could be brought over, but I don't know if that would be too disruptive.
it is pretty difficult to do a mid-year transition.
Okay. All
So,
right, thank you. We'll go ahead and see if the public have any comments here. There are no hands raised. Oh, sorry, no, there's one now. I see Candy, I'm thinking that's Candy Capagrossi.
Yes, yes. Hi. I just wanted to congratulate the board for hiring such competent people. It's so refreshing. I know change is hard. I know people are used to doing things in a certain way, but I think this is such a forward step. And I congratulate Marty and Catherine. What we've just seen is some of the most basic stuff you would expect to see. So the fact it wasn't there was kind of surprising and shocking, but that's okay. We're moving on and things are getting better. So thank you and congratulations.
Thank you. And Julie Stein is next. Go ahead, Julie, and unmute yourself.
Okay, thanks, Sylvia. I just want to echo Ms. Capagrossi's comments. I sort of took some notes during the presentation, and I would also like to commend you. I mean, first of all, changing auditors is a pretty bold step because you don't know what a new set of eyes is going to reveal. So I appreciate that you did that. And then making the full movements toward public sector fund accounting, I think is very appropriate and will make a big difference. And I was glad to hear about separation of duties and procurement policies and HR policies and improvement of internal controls, and especially some recognition of the limitations of QuickBooks, which has, I think, been used for all of Kensington accounting across both districts for a long time. And some recent fresh eyes on that has revealed that we could be doing better or using QuickBooks better or another accounting software. So I would wrap it up to say that I think you're really moving in the right direction. And I also applaud you for doing this. Even if it takes a little time, it's very worthwhile.
Thank you. Okay, I see no more public comment, and I'm going to go back to Director Saraswat.
It's just a note, I think you've blocked or something, somehow Director Natoli has been blocked.
The video.
Oh, I did that?
Oh, you have.
Yeah, yeah. When I try to open it up, it does it.
Okay, I've asked you to start your video and maybe that will work. Oh, great. I thought you had done that. I did not realize that it had come from this end. Sorry about that.
No, yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right, so this was just a presentation, so there's nothing more here to do at the moment. We're going to now go into the discussion and action calendar, which everything here will be discussed and acted on individually. I'm going to remind everyone and the public that you can request to speak on any one of these items for up to 3 minutes when I call for public comment, but please raise your hand and remember again to limit your comments to 3 minutes and to speak once on an item. And we're going to start with the annual approval of the Kensington Park Assessment District levy. And it will include adoption of 3 resolutions for the fiscal year 2021 to 22 to collect the Kensington Park assessment pursuant to the Landscaping Lighting Act of 1972. And this includes 3 sub items. At this point, I don't know if I need to read all 3 sub items or if we're going to go ahead and have any kind of presentation on this, or do we just go ahead and move on the items?
There is going to be a presentation, actually, yeah. So if we, Catherine, I was going to let you speak and also introduce our guests. I believe are they here?
They are here, I believe.
Yes,
and
they are.
So go ahead, Catherine, please introduce the rest of this item.
all right. So we have our from NBS, our consultant who we use to administer the levies, Daryl Zarate, and Tim Seufert. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. So basically they're going to speak to us about our current levy and just kind of the limitations of it. It's a very, small levy for this park. It's around $18 a household. So that's how much goes to support the park. And everyone knows that the general fund then supports the park, for anything over that amount. So I'll hand it over to them and they can just kind of discuss everything. I also want to thank them for being here today.
Hi, like Catherine said, so I'm a consultant from NBS and we administer the Kensington Park Assessment District. This item is brought to the board annually for adoption of certain resolutions, again, pursuant to the Landscaping and Lighting Act of 1972. Some of the improvements that are funded by this assessment include tree pruning of Kensington Park, the utilities, street lighting, miscellaneous services and equipment, certain repairs, and other incidental expenses. Just a little bit of background. The district was formed on December 6, 1994. Back then in 1994, the assessment was only $10 per single family resident. Today, the proposed assessment for fiscal year 21-22 is $18.65. So like Catherine said, that's a very small amount. That's only an increase of 28 cents from the prior year. The total number of parcels that are subject to this assessment it's approximately 2,100. And currently, the estimated budget, so the operating budget for the Kensington Park District is approximately $121,000, with the revenue from the assessment only being $42,000 of that. So we're looking at approximately $79,000 that would need to be supplemented by the general fund. So with that said, what is probably going to happen as maintenance costs increase and certain public improvements are in need of repair or replacing, there is going to be a need for the district to explore, possibly increasing these assessments so that the district is self-sufficient and so that it no longer needs to be supplemented by the general fund. I'm going to turn it over to Tim Seufert so he could talk more real brief about the process of getting the approval for the increase and just basic procedures for that increase, just as a basic overview, I guess, of what to expect if that's how the district wanted to proceed.
Hey, good evening, everybody. I had to put myself on mute. We have an 8-month-old puppy here who's decided to start barking as soon as I'm on camera. We could go on for a long time, and obviously it's late, and I'm happy to answer questions. But as Joanna mentioned, so we've talked about the annual process for this, older assessment district and the subject to this 3% basically cap, right, with inflation. So the costs are significantly higher than what the district, the landscape and lighting district earns, if you will. So just sort of panning back, as you all know, you have parcel taxes, and then their cousin is the CFD, community facilities districts, and then you have assessment districts, which is what the landscape and lighting is. These have been around for 100 years plus in California, and they can fund different types of things, and we can spend an entire day talking about that. But in general, so the parcel tax, like the police tax, is approved by registered voters, and that's, for all intents and purposes, is a 2/3 approval process. An assessment district, which is what we're talking about here, the landscape and lighting assessment district, if there is the desire, the policy direction, political will, whatever you want to call it, to move forward, what we'd want to do is, obviously have communications, discuss it with the community and engage the community. But the technical process is we would have to redo the engineer's report, look at current costs, look at the current reality of today in 2021 versus what it was back in the 90s. And the legal rigor has certainly risen in the last, 20 years plus. So we do an engineer's report, and then that is obviously reviewed with the public. And then the approval process is you send out ballots to the property owners. So it doesn't matter if they're a registered voter or not. It doesn't even matter if they're a US citizen or not. It goes to the owner of the property. So if the new engineer's report says, assessments are going to be X dollars, we mail out ballots, and then the ballots may be returned by the property owner, or they may not, they can choose. But of the ballots returned, we look at them and weighted by dollar amount. So if you have a larger assessment, you have a larger vote, quote unquote. So we tally those up at a board meeting, and along our timeline. And this takes minimum 6 months, and I advise more like 12 months to really do it right. So we tabulate those ballots, and if you have more protesting than you do acquiescing, I guess, or agreeing or wanting the increase, then you cannot increase the assessment. If you have less protest, obviously, then you can go forward. You have the green light. So that's the technical part of the approval process. And obviously the board has the ultimate approval before these ballots even go out, right? The board would call for that ballot process. I don't call an election because it's not subject to the elections code and all of the various, machinations that goes through. But the board would call for this ballot process, and then notices are sent out similar to, when you send out a notice for water rates or sewer rates or whatever. That's what everybody calls the Prop 218 notice. But unlike water rates or sewer rates, there's a ballot that's actually sent to those property. So that's the technical process. It's really a matter of desires and need and budget. We've been through these over and over again all over the state of California and certain communities. Sometimes they're successful and sometimes they're not, but it's really a matter of, prioritization and budget and what's important. Obviously $18 is a pretty nominal amount in this day and age. But I don't want to make a value judgment on that. Obviously that's for you all to decide. But, certainly compared to like the police tax or, some of these others, it is quite low. So with that, is there anything I didn't cover? And happy to answer whatever questions anybody has.
Let me let General Manager Brown either comment or ask a question first before I go to director comments, because she might be clarifying something.
Great.
Thank you. Actually, I got a question in the last couple of days, and I thought, you know what, as I was listening to you, you all might be better equipped at answering this. I have my own hunches, but I thought I'd let you answer. So let's just say, what is wrong with letting the general fund shore up the Parks and Rec and Lighting District? I mean, what do you see as the challenge with that? And why is that potentially an issue?
Well, there's nothing technically wrong with that, but presumably the assessment district is for, the benefits that were laid out in that engineer's report, and to provide it takes now a certain amount of money. So if the general fund is backfilling it, then the general fund can't provide other services that the general fund provides, right? I mean, that's really the end of the day. If you spend $1 on the assessment district, you don't have that dollar to do other services that the CSD provides.
Right.
Catherine, did you want to say something as well?
I was just wondering if you, Tim, could speak more as to the time frame of the Prop 218 and how long that takes once you initiate it, and just that process. from a time perspective?
Sure, yeah, happy to do that. And just going back to the question before, you know, it really, some cities or districts, what have you, you know, their general fund is tapped out. So they start only providing the services that they can with the assessment, right? And that in some communities has been a tough road. They've had to close parks, so they stop watering medians or, you know, whatever it might be. So it's just a matter of there's so much money coming in and there's so much desire for service, right? But to your question about the timeline, so what I mentioned earlier, the very minimum I don't suggest to do something like this is like technically about 6 months, but please, let's not do it in 6 months because it's rushing, it's not good. It's not good to have that community feel rushed. You want to have that dialogue, right? You want the board on board, you want the community on board. But ultimately, the technical part is, you know, around, you know, a little less than 6 months. You have to do an engineer's report, which takes time. You have to mail out, you have to have certain past resolutions and mail out these notices. And then you have a 45-day mandatory waiting period and such. And we can provide you with a sort of, you know, pro forma timeline if you want via email, you know, in the next day or two. But literally, the, you know, it's like any other noticing period, whether it's, you know, design or whatever, right? You have to provide notices and give time for public comment and that kind of thing.
Okay, Vice President Natoli, your hand was up.
Yeah, excuse me. I was just curious. So you would, for example, examine how much money the district has spent over the last years on the park as an example to try to come up with what should be there, because I frankly think there's been a lot of neglect of the park because of financial shortages.
Yeah, we're not really going to go forensically looking at what was done in the past, but rather look prospectively as to what needs to happen going forward in the future. And the difference between an assessment district and a parcel tax is an assessment district has to have the benefit to property. So there's a lot of sort of analysis to show, you know, what the benefit is to the properties for these services, right? So it's prospective.
But if it's
makes sense,
I'm just trying to get some assessment of where you would stop, because you could think of a lot of things that could be done in the park that would make it even better than it is. But at some point, you need to have some kind of cap on what you would do, I would think.
Well, I think it's sort of the, you know, the reasonable person test at some point, right? Yes, I mean, you could go pretty extravagant, right? But if people get a ballot for some really high number, they're not, you know, they're going to vote it down, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So it has to sort of meet the sniff test, if you will, politically and policy wise at the board. But there's no sort of one size fits all around the state for this kind of thing. It really boils down to local control and local community goals.
Yeah, thank you.
Director Sharon-Swat.
Yeah, thank you for this information. I have a question and then a comment. You said the larger vote per the weight of the property or the valuation. Who is that based on tax, county tax rolls evaluation or?
No, so let's just keep it very simple. Let's just say that our new assessment district that we would come up with, there are only 5 properties, right? Just being really simple here. And let's say there, you know, it's 2 single-family homes and, you know, 3 apartment buildings, just for sake of argument. And the 2 single-family homes are going to have a $25 a year assessment, and the multifamily unit building is going to have a $50 a year. So that property has 50 votes, and the single-family home has 25 votes.
Oh, okay.
It's literally like $1, 1 vote. It has nothing to do. And it by law, it cannot be based on the assessed value.
Okay, okay, great.
Because it's so all over the map with Prop 13, right?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That's why I was wondering. No, that makes perfectly logical. Thank you. And I think this, my suggestion is that this will lead into a board discussion, possibly at our goal setting, because we have the charge to be holistic with all the needs of the district. And because we have the park, we have the police building, we have maybe composting, we have park buildings, we have all these things that are drawing and have on our funds and have needs. And, you know, in the past, we might have just decided that it's wiser to defer to the general fund for monies for the park because asking for an increase wouldn't pass, or we want to wait and ask for an increase that's much larger on a bigger project. So I think this will lead to good board discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, General Manager Brown.
Yes, very quickly, I just wanted to say that in my experience, the 218 process, kind of getting back to Vice President Natoli's question, when you look at, you know, kind of the future of what's needed for the park, typically, a lot of times that's driven by both the staff working with a consultant who would help with the process, and then that's shared back with the, you know, with the board and the community for feedback on, you know, the list of things that we're going to look at before developing actually now what's the amount of money we need to assess for, right? So it's, you know, there is some iteration there back and forth. It isn't like we just kind of take things out of the sky and, you know, come up with a number. It is like, you know, based on looking at, oh, this is what staff thinks on the ground is needed. Now let's go back and share that with the board and the public and see what they think. And, you know, kind of that back and forth before setting on like, okay, these are the things we're going to now figure out what the assessment should be based on the list we've all agreed to, basically. So thank you.
Catherine, and then we're going to go to the public.
I just wanted to ask either Tim or Darrell Ann. Darrell Ann and I had spoken a few times about the possibility of also instead of having the landscape and lighting district, converting it to a Melrose district. So could you guys speak a little bit about that and what that process would be and what it would look like and how it would give more flexibility to that assessment?
Yeah, that's a, without going down too much of the proverbial rabbit's hole, there's a lot to be discussed there. But as I mentioned earlier, there's kind of there's the special tax route and there's the assessment route, right? The assessment district, which is what it is currently. The special tax is the Melrose Community Facilities District, which is what I mentioned was the CFD. I don't call it a Melrose because there's lots of history. But it's the same thing. It's a CFD, Community Facilities District, which is extremely flexible type of a parcel tax that you can do things with that assessment districts can't be done. Like, for example, you cannot have an assessment district to provide police services. That's just not allowed in California. There's a whole bunch of discussion that we don't need to have, but you can sometimes do it for fire services because there's a direct benefit to property, right? But if there was a discussion to change from the assessment to the tax, it's a higher threshold because of that 2/3. But I would absolutely applaud that because it's legally, it's just cleaner, and there's a lot that you can do with a CFD that you can't do with an assessment district. But really, I think all those things should be put on the table for consideration. But it's an all-day discussion kind of thing almost.
I want to get to the public and try to keep our timing as I'm realizing you think this is late. You haven't been to enough Kensington meetings. I'm going to go to the attendees, and Gail Feldman, please go ahead, and you have up to 3 minutes.
Yes, hi. Sylvia, I'm hoping that maybe you could allow another question to Mr. Seifert. So I have a question about you said that we get a $42,000 in revenue for the park maintenance O&M. And I'm wondering, of that, what percent goes for just doing this annual engineering report and assessment that you need to go through? That's one question. And then the other question is, sorry, I'm very rusty with the different assessment legislative issue requirements, but I thought we had set up the lighting and landscape district under like a 1918 lighting and landscape authority. So how did that end up becoming under 218, which I thought Prop 218, which I thought had other voting requirements than a balloting mechanism?
So yeah, I am not a lawyer, so I'll leave that as the the advisory there. But a couple questions. So the annual engineering report process and the collection through the county tax bill, yes, there is administrative cost there. And because this district is so small, it's the minimum cost is there's just sort of a minimum amount of work. So I think, Darrell Ann, what is it, like 10% roughly that's for the annual process? I'm gonna say ballparky.
Yeah.
And to your other question about 218, so 218 was essentially a constitutional amendment that affects a long list of government revenue mechanisms, right? Property related fees, taxes, assessments, all that kind of thing. And it continues to evolve. So Prop 218 affects water rates. It affects assessment districts, even though they predate. I'm not sure. I don't think the 1918 is right. I think this is 1972 Act, Landscape and Lighting District, right, Caroline?
Yes.
So that law goes literally back to 1972. There is a 1913 and 1915 Act assessment district. That's not what this is.
Okay. I'd like to go to the next comment. Hold on one second. We're going to go to Delk. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Delk.
Yeah. Hey, Stevens Delk. I don't have any prepared notes for this, and so I'm going to really mess it up a lot. But I looked recently at KPPCSD special taxes and other related things that had been paid. And I noticed that in 1995-96, when the purchase of what we called the new park came up, the district had just been raising their community service district special tax by leaps and bounds for about maybe 10 or more years. And so, am I still on? So I noticed that 2 years before we purchased that park, the community service district tax was like $210 for a single family parcel. The year that we purchased the park, that tax was $280. The tax for purchasing the park was $110, and the tax for maintenance of the park was about $10. So in a 2-year period of time, the KPPCSD went from $210 per single family parcel to $402. And I think that was a big, huge increase. Since then, we have paid off the park, so that 100 plus tax per parcel has dropped to zero. So we're currently paying less overall than we did the year that this was approved. So there, in fact, may be some willingness of the community to increase the maintenance fee. although Gail will be throwing a fit knowing that I might have proposed that we increase taxes. That's it. Sorry for not
Thank you.
prepared. But I did send my table to Marty, and I think it's correct. But again, it's based on a single family parcel, but about 90% of the parcels are in fact that classification.
Thank you. Linda Lipscomb is next. Give me 1 second. Okay, Linda, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Hi there. Good evening, one and all, and congratulations. I didn't get to say it before to Chief Gancash. That's a good thing. Thanks so much, and thanks for Chief Schuld. He was excellent as well. Many kudos to both of you. On to the issue of the moment. I just have a simple structural question, sir. Mr. Seifert, you spoke just briefly in terms of process of the way in which votes are counted, and you spoke of a weighted vote. Is this going to be, any propositions with respect to an increase, going to be a uniform tax, as I understood it to be now, or is it going to be based upon engineers' assessment of the value of the parcel? In other words, will it vary from parcel to parcel? Because the way I see it, the upkeep of the park does not vary with the value of the parcel. In other words, it doesn't have a particular benefit to one parcel over the other. So just a clarification on structural, what are you speaking about?
So with an assessment district, there is a protest ballot process. So it's not an election, but it's kind of like one. The protest ballot, and it's based on the assessment per year for the parcel. It has nothing to do with the property's assessed value that is used for the 1% tax rate. So the assessed value can be $100,000 or $1 million. It doesn't matter. But what matters is if the property is assessed $25 for the landscape and lighting assessment district, and then a property that's larger or it's a duplex or whatever is assessed $50, that property has 50 votes and the other property has 25 votes.
So fundamentally, you're saying there is a weighting that somebody who owns a more expensive property gets a greater vote, if you will, based on the value of the property?
Once again, it has nothing to do with the value of the property. It's the amount of the assessment that is made. So think of it as like the parcel tax, and the uniform language has no applicability here. So if the engineer's report says one property will be charged $50 a year and another property is charged $25 a year, then one property has 50 votes, the other has 25 votes.
So does it vary presently? Currently, does it vary from parcel to parcel?
There's no balloting process occurring now because
I understand that. I'm saying current assessments of the landscape and lighting as it exists now.
It's Darrell-Ann, I think it's $18 per single family, and there's a couple other rates. I don't have it open.
$28.66
For the, yeah.
For multifamily.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in that case, 18 votes for the one property and 28 votes for the other property. If we were balloting, what we're not, because it's already been approved. You don't have to approve it each and every year.
And almost every property in Kensington, if you look at the NBS report, is $18.64. There's just a couple that are $28.66.
Right. It is the tail wagging the dog in your community for sure. So
thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. So there are no more comments from the public or from the board. So I think we will now move to the actual adoption of the 3 resolutions we need to make. Sorry, I didn't see you there, Chris. Go ahead.
It came up very late. Sorry. I just had a question, and maybe he probably said it and I missed it, but You send the ballots out, do you have to have a certain percentage of the ballots back to have a valid election, or is it, you could get 2 ballots back and that would be enough?
If you sent out 100 ballots and literally not a single one comes back, you do not have a protest, which means therefore the board could approve the new assessment. If you get,
So by default, yeah.
if you get 3 back and 2 say yes and 1 says no, then you have a green light. If 2 say no and 1 says yes, you have a red light.
Got it.
It's a little strange, but it's, you know, it's kind of like those who show up vote.
Okay, thank you. If the board would like, I would be happy to make the resolutions as I have them all here in front of me, or if it would be more appropriate for another board member, I'll go ahead and just make the first motion. So the first motion would be to adopt a resolution for fiscal year 2021 to collect the park assessment pursuant to the Landscape and Lighting Act of 1972. And it would be to initiate the proceedings for the levy and collection of the assessment for the Kensington Park Assessment District for the fiscal year. Do I have a second for that motion?
I'll second
For that resolution, I mean.
I'll second that
and
resolution.
Director Saraswat seconds. So let's start with Vice President Anatoli,
Yes.
Director Deppie,
Yes.
and Director Saraswat.
Yes.
And I vote yes, so that first resolution passes 4-0. The second resolution is to approve the annual report for the Kensington Park Assessment District for fiscal year 2021 to 2022. May I have a second?
I'll second that
I'll second.
resolution.
Okay. Vice President Anatoli,
Yes.
Director Deppie,
Yes.
Director Saraswat.
Yes.
I vote yes. The second resolution passes 4-0. And the third resolution is to declare the district's intention to levy and collect the assessment for the Kensington Park Assessment District for fiscal year 2021 to 22.
Sorry, I'll second that.
Rachel just keeps beating you out there. All right, Vice President Anatoli,
Yes.
Director Deppie,
Yes.
Director Saraswat,
Yes.
and I vote yes. So the third resolution passes 4-0. I want to thank our consultants for providing some detail and education to the board and the residents about this process. Thanks for your work on this year's assessment and the levy and the report.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you. Okay, the next item is a recommendation for action to approve budget authority of a not to exceed amount of $15,000 as a rate at a rate of $135 to contract with Andy Heath, financial consultant, and authorize the general manager or his designee to execute a contract with Mr. Heath for financial consulting services. And General Manager Brown will will introduce this article.
Yes, so as you may recall, this was on the agenda last month, and as I stated earlier, as part of the finance sort of presentation I did earlier in the evening was related to this as well. Nothing's really changed, so I think I'm just gonna, stick to the high points, which were, there were 3 things that were asked of me at the last meeting, which was to come back and with the hourly rate of Mr. Heath, which is $135 an hour. Was the other one was the software program. He does use Excel. It is a unique Excel model that he creates that is based entirely on our revenues and our expenditures, and allows for manipulation, if you will, to try different projections of different things and how they might all work together. For example, if we're going to do labor contracts and there's going to be salary increases over X number of years, versus renovating the annex building versus, possibly tenant improvements to a temporary space to move the PD, being able to look at all of those things together and evaluate the kind of revenue that would be needed to do a variety of different projects simultaneously. So that's Excel spreadsheet and the Excel model that he uses, that he creates. And then the last thing that I was tasked with was to come up with a scope of work. So in addition to the financial forecasting model with which itself wouldn't exceed $7,000. Of course, it depends, it could be less than that. It depends on kind of how complex our revenue and expenditure stream is in terms of designing the model and the calculations. And then after that would be the items that were listed at the end of the financial presentation. Those are consistent with the presentation and looking at the district's compliance with GAAP, reviewing fund structure, financial reporting, recommendations on internal control framework, and recommendations on audit readiness and preparation. So those are the highlights that are a little different from last month. And with that, I think I'll just open it up for questions from the board and or public.
Any board members have any further questions? Okay.
I don't have a question, but well, I guess I do have a question, not a comment, which is considering now that based on the fire board decision, we need to find a new space for the police. Will this help you advise you on the financial consequences to the police district with leasing a new building and tenant improvements that might be needed and so on?
Yes, we can build that into the model to look at a variety of what that could cost to the district, but also a variety of revenue streams. I mean, a bond versus a parcel tax versus, those kinds of things.
Great, great, thank you.
Yep.
Director Deppie?
Great. A couple of questions. One, have you looked at actual financial forecasting software instead of building an Excel spreadsheet from scratch? And I ask that because I do some really basic rudimentary forecasting for our company using Excel. I'm no expert, but we have a pretty simple structure. But even with that, I've seen it get problematic if someone else touches it. And I've seen big Excel spreadsheets get very complicated. You've got a lot of formulas relating to each other. And at some point they get very, very hard to change because you don't know what you're going to break in the process. And so it's not the best. I mean, it's one of these tools that's been used for just about everything. And it's certainly been used for financial forecasting a lot, but it's not, I think, the best tool to do it, just because of once you get a very complicated model built up, you need an expert to make any modifications, and you can have subtle bugs in an Excel spreadsheet that you don't even know because you've got formulas against formulas against formulas, and pretty soon you're just relying on the numbers that are getting spit out without having any real way to verify it or to double check it or whatever. So I know it's a powerful tool and it's been used for this a lot, but I'm just curious if you've looked at dedicated forecasting software that would be less, I would say, touchy and error prone and easier for the district to modify. Because I would think that once he builds this, he'd be the only one that really would be safe to modify it, to add things to it. So we'd be pretty much always having to be using him for any future changes. And of course, things are always going to change with our district. You can build a model now and next week things could change.
To answer your question, I have not looked at other financial forecasting models. As I mentioned before, we used this in Marysville and it was successful in looking at a variety of different variables. And it was also taught to the finance director and she uses it now. One of the things that I like about it is that we also own it. And then it's something that Catherine could learn how to use. And instead of relying on Andy to update and make changes, he could be more like a touchstone for some recommendations and advice, but really that the finance director would really own it and learn how to use it. And, more like using Andy kind of as a guide or a mentor, if you will, to answer some questions, but not be, ultimately long range, be the person working on it and always manipulating and trying the different things. So.
And would this come with, I guess, good documentation about what he's done, where the formulas are, how do they work, what's the rationale behind them? So if there are any problems, You don't need to call him every time there's an issue.
I can ask him for that. I don't know that we actually got that from him in Marysville, but we can include that if you'd like to include that in the recommendation, certainly.
Well, if Catherine's going to have to be the one maybe maintaining it, I think that would be important.
Right. Good point.
Director Shearis-Watt.
And my other question is, no, it's just at this point, and I agree, Catherine's done just amazing work. She fixed things we didn't even know need fixing. It was, she worked really hard. She's still working hard. So this is not meant at all to question her skills. I don't know who's doing what at this point. We've got, I think, Mays is doing something. Other people have been mentioned. So could you just lay out, as far as finance goes, who's responsible for what? So we know where he fits into the whole picture. And everybody that's involved that right now with the district and being paid for financial consulting.
Catherine, do you want to respond to that? Because I think you're a little, the nitty gritty.
Yeah. So when I came back in February, Mays was doing my job and oversight, and they were kind of overseeing our part-time accountant Vivian, her work. She was just kind of keeping up with kind of the day-to-day, invoices and payroll and that kind of stuff. So when I came back, I took back what I was doing before, basically. And Mays we've kind of weaned them down to their pre-level, which is going down to probably about like maybe 4 to 6 hours a month is the hope in the next month here. Maybe even less than that. I'd say still 4 hours is probably a good estimate for Mays's work of oversight. And that's just the current, kind of oversight of my work. And they're, helping close the books every month, but I'm still involved in that process. And then they also have done a few reports for us, like the SEO reporting. We had 2 different SEO reporting things that they helped us with. And then Vivian does basically, all the inputting of the invoices and AP and coding them and the payroll, and she's working with us with InTime to get that. InTime is really going to decrease all of our time significantly for payroll. I'd say that this was our first run in InTime, and it's gone from, I think it would take me 2 hours to review Vivian's payroll, just because I had to review all the timesheets and review the input, because those were in Excel spreadsheets. Basically, each timesheet was an Excel spreadsheet for each police employee. So now that's probably, I think it took me 10 minutes to review her work from 2 hours. And then Vivian's work probably took her about 3 to 4 hours. So now that's going to go down to like 1 to 2 hours, probably, I'd say, for her input of payroll. So the payroll process is like really getting consolidated, and that leaves more time for us to do all these other things that we also need to do still. But that's kind of the structure. We have Mays kind of at this kind of top level, helping with reconciliations and a few reporting. Then I'm doing, finance manager, HR, when anything else business related that needs to happen. And then Vivian's helping to support me. And right now Vivian's spent about, 10 to 15 hours a week. So, and then I'm between, I'd say the lowest I've been is 22 or 24, but I'm probably closer to 26 to 28 hours a week. So that's the structure. So there's, I definitely, there's a lot to do. And I think that, I'm not trying to persuade anyone either way, but it would be great to have a person that has been in public finance or, governmental finance for that long to ask them questions and to give me some guidance. I'm pretty new at this, so I have other finance experience and other things, but in government, this is the first government that I've worked for. So, I have to say, yeah, I think that sums it up. I hope that gives you a good overview of the finance department
thank you.
functioning. Okay.
Director Saraswat.
Yeah, I just had a question. I understand the 7,000 for the modeling, and then I'm wondering about the extra 8,000, if you have that already directed or if you're going to use only as is. Because I understand that we do have money in that budget, but overall our budget is so tight that wherever we save is really fantastic. So I'm just wondering if you already have a project in mind, or are we just as needed?
Well, I would really, Catherine and I talked about it a couple of times about this additional scope that's beyond the model of helping us to assess the gap and looking at, sorry, I'm at the wrong page. Those additional bullet items in the staff report, review the fund structure, we'd be looking to him to help us with those additional things that are outside the development of the model. And
it was the last page of the presentation. It was gap. If we're
it's also on the staff report. Yeah.
If we're keeping up with gap standards, the fund structure, can you go over those items again?
Sure. Yeah. It's in addition, the model was up to $7,000, and then the remaining funds would be used to assess district compliance with gap, review our fund structure and ensure industry standards are being instituted, review financial reporting procedures and ensure that we're doing best practices are being used for public sector and public agency, review and provide recommendations on the internal control framework and on the oversight of different people doing different things. So you're ensuring internal controls, and then reviewing and providing recommendations on audit readiness and the process and how to be prepared for the audit as soon as the books close June 30th. So those were the additional scope of work for the up to 8,000 that we were looking for additional consulting from Andy on.
Okay, there are no more questions from the board. Chris, is your hand back up? You're muted.
Should we give a screen? All right. I'm looking at the staff report and the scope of work, the bullet points. I'm wondering, are any of those handled by the auditor? Would the auditor not identify if we're not complying with gaps, or would they not identify if we weren't, ensuring industry standards or any of this? Doesn't an audit identify some of those issues?
They do, to the extent that we give them information and they're evaluating our finances, but they don't look at the day-to-day operations of what we're doing the other 10, 11 months of the year. I mean, we give them information and then they ask us to, often they follow up with backup questions of wanting some additional backup, but they're not really looking at what we're doing internally on a day-to-day basis. I don't know, Catherine, do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, an audit's just providing like assurance at a top level. So it's not going in, it's not saying that there was no financial fraud. That would have to be a whole different type of audit, a forensic audit. That would go more into depth of your internal controls, like an audit is taking samples from each different thing, and it depends on how much that auditor decides to sample. And I have to say, this auditor sampled a lot, and this auditor asked everyone that works in administration, multiple questions. He interviewed everyone. The year before when I participated, that was my first year at the district. I don't think we had nearly as many questions. So, and Mays had worked on some of the audit before I had come back, and they had already done a good amount of work also with the auditor. So, an audit, it only provides so much. You have to, there's still, things that they can't look at and that they would never be able to, touch on, because like if, for instance, if they're looking at payroll, they're just going to sample payroll. So they'd sample this payroll, they sample I think 3 from the previous calendar year, and then the next calendar year, they sampled 3 more. So, you know, a forensic audit would probably look at everything if you were going to sample, if you were going to look into payroll. So I can get more language on the limits of audits, but they only tell so much. They
Well,
don't.
and if I could just add, I mean, really an audit is looking at the past, it's retrospective. So you're looking at what you did in the past and whether you did it right or not. It's not strategic, looking to the future, how you should do it better, or, you know, following best practices and industry standards.
Yeah.
And Mays didn't get involved in this at all? I thought Mays was possibly brought in to do some of these things.
Mays has done some of this, but they haven't done any financial, not as many, no financial models for us. They've helped build few reports.
But they really were brought into, I mean, to me, from what I've seen since I've been here, was to fill the gap when Catherine left. I mean, everything, all the people I've dealt with at Mays have been doing different aspects of what her job was, you know, before she left the district.
Yeah, and I think the idea with Mays was to have that top level, okay, in case your one, you know, part-time finance director isn't working there, that there's a backup for that person, so that you're never left with no one and you have to go out to a temp agency for that role, you know, and it's like an emergency. So the idea of having Mays is more like this top level kind of function, because they have a lot of employees that can jump in. They have multiple levels of accountants that work there. But right before I came back, they were going to have to transfer from the person that was filling in for me to a new person. So that, I don't know what that was going to look like, but you know, it's just how it is with accounting firms, large accounting firms.
I'd like to kind of keep us moving if possible. Any more questions from the board? Okay, any public comment on this item? Okay, there is none. So we're looking for, I'll make the resolution to approve budget authority of a not to exceed amount of $15,000 at a rate of $135 an hour to contract with Andy Heath, finance consultant, and authorize the general manager or her designee to execute a contract with Mr. Heath for finance consulting services as we discussed. Can I have a second for that motion?
I'll second it, but I'll say that I thought of Director Madavi asking to see the contract. So best wishes, Director Madavi.
Oh, I'm sorry. I see an attendee hand that went up after we made the motion. So we have a motion on the floor in a second, and I'll go ahead and allow Gail to talk. Apologies for that. Thank you.
No, sorry, I had a hard time manipulating the hand. So just a question really for you, and thank you, Director Deppy, for raising some of the issues. I guess, Catherine, really this goes to you and in your presentation where you outlined a number of policies that sounded like they were still outstanding financial management policies. So in order for your consultant to really evaluate whether you have the appropriate internal controls, you really need to have those policies drafted to review. So then the question goes, well, who does that? Is that something that you're going to be able to take on, or is that something you're going to then need to have Mr. Heath write, or some other person at Mays, or I guess those, so all of it goes again, there's a lot of issues about like what the scope of work is for Mr. Heath, aside from creating the modeling for forecasting, which we had talked about in previous meetings. And again, that is really something that I think you need to nail down as a board, what the scope of work is, because $15,000 isn't going to go that far if it needs to be, a huge policy manual written for your, financial management of the district. So those are just some things to keep in thought, and perhaps you don't need to do everything, but where your vulnerabilities are at this moment, and those are the things that maybe perhaps you need to address. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I think that, that particular question was answered twice for both in Marty's presentation and directly to Director Saraswat, and again just now. So those several items were enumerated, but clearly, as Director Saraswat mentioned, there is more prioritization that has to happen, and there's a lot of things that do have to take place. But I think those additional items in the scope of work have been identified.
Where's the scope of work?
The 4 items that were mentioned in the presentation were included in the answer to that question, and in the staff report and in the comments. So I think it was, I mean, it's pretty clear to me what those items are. It doesn't mean that there isn't more to be done, but the items that we're contracting for into this particular amount of money, which is a not to exceed amount, have been enumerated. Okay. Sorry, I'm losing track of the screen here. So we are now ready to take the vote on the motion, which has been seconded. Vice President Natoli.
Yes.
Director Deppie.
I'm not comfortable with the vagueness of it, some of the things that Gail said, and I'm not crazy about a custom-built Excel spreadsheet that could break easily, so I'm going to vote no.
Director Saraswat.
I'm going to vote yes.
I vote yes. The motion carries 3-1. Okay, we're coming close to the end, and our last item is a recommendation to approve budget authority for the GM or her designee to enter into an agreement with Roush Communication Consultants for a not to exceed amount of $13,000 to facilitate a strategic planning process and develop a strategic plan with the board. And this is also going to be introduced by General Manager Brown.
Good evening again. So the item that's before you is to engage Roush Communications. I was directed by the board to engage and solicit a proposal from Martin Roush of Roush Communications, which is attachment 1, and come up with a budget based on the proposed elements, which are listed in the staff report. And just to highlight quickly, it would be an opportunity to assess the current and upcoming challenges and opportunities facing the district, as well as a forum to discuss them intensely and to build consensus, and for focused priorities and strategy, a final strategic plan that includes a mission, vision, board level goals and objectives designed to meet the identified need, challenges and opportunities of the district, an implementation plan, including timing and assigned responsible staff for each strategic initiative, and a plan for board monitoring and oversight to ensure that the strategic plan is implemented in a timely fashion. So that is the main focus of the strategic planning process. And if the board were to approve it, we'd hope to start individual interviews with board members in an effort to plan for the strategic planning process in June, and then hold the workshop hopefully in July, depending on Roush Communication scheduling and the scheduling of the board. And as you can see, I just want to mention the fiscal impact. The proposal is to basically spend up to no more than $4,000 in this fiscal year. And the rest of it would be spent in the next fiscal year. And as you can see, we'd be taking that from transferring funds out of the legal account, which we're under budget. Thank you, Anne. And transferring those over to the consulting account for this year. And then of course, we'll be rebuilding the consulting account based on a variety of different consulting initiatives that we're hopeful that the board will be supportive of in the new fiscal year, and that budget will be coming forward in June. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Director Saraswat.
I'm an enthusiastic supporter of strategic planning. I think it's really important that the board set goals and that we determine where we're moving forward, especially now that we've been through this kind of long transition time. And I've heard good things about Mr. Roush, but I do feel compelled to say that I was taken aback by the numerous typos and grammar mistakes in his presentation. And if that were to be our final product, I would be embarrassed. It looks like they need a proofreader. So I do want to, I don't want to be overly critical, but I thought that was not appropriate.
I can certainly, I mean, I didn't do the proofreading on his proposal, obviously, but any product that he would produce for the district, I certainly would oversee and proof before it came to the board, which is, you know, typically what's done when you have a consultant prepare something that we're going to own. Then of course I'm going to want to oversee that before you ever look at it. So I would certainly be advocating that here as well.
I agree, but I don't think that you should have the bulk of that burden. So I want to know that he's capable of doing that, because we shouldn't pay him and then pay, you know, and then take your time
Good point.
to oversee his work.
Director Deppie.
So I've been, asking for this. I think a lot of us have been asking for this for a long time. And I want to make sure it's not really spelled out specifically that one of the major areas we look at is our goals for the police department and how what is our vision for the police department? What are their priorities? What should they be spending their time on? Maybe how big they should be. We never really have tackled that or dealt with that as a board. It's been kind of assumed. We've had some surveys done about what the public thinks is important, but the board as a whole has never really weighed in on, this is where we see the priorities for the police department. This is where they should be spending their time. This is, how we see it operating, not on a day-to-day basis. That's for the chief of police to do. But I think to be fair to the chief of police, he should know what the board expects from the police department. And so I want to make sure that that will be an important part of this process, and the document will lay out pretty specifically what our goals and ideas for the police department are.
Well, so he and I did talk about it at length on the phone before he prepared the proposal, and I did discuss this specifically with him. And I would just say that, your one-on-one interviews with him will really help to formulate and craft what the actual strategic planning day looks like. I mean, he's, operating in broad strokes right here without having talked to you. But, I know from firsthand experience that he's going to talk to you, and then it's going to get refined even more based on what he knew individually. And I think he's already totally teed up for the police department and, setting priorities and the board doing that. And if he didn't spell it out as explicitly as he should have, I apologize for that, but we did have a lengthy conversation about it.
Right. Well, I mean, that's my feeling. And if the board as a whole doesn't feel that way, then that's also for the board to decide. But I wanted to bring that up. That's my sort of important issue, besides just board policy and direction in general.
Vice President Natoli.
I'm of two minds. I've wanted this, and I think Marty Rausch would be terrific, but in light of Director Mahdavi's resignation, I'm just wondering on timing, whether it makes sense to wait until the board appoints another director so that that director can also weigh in on this.
That's certainly at the pleasure of the board. However the board wants to proceed, it's fine.
It looks like the timing for this would be to engage with individual interviews, and there would be no gathering of this actual strategic planning session wouldn't be happening until into the next fiscal year. And so we will be talking shortly about having a special meeting to do that. But I think I can say, just on process issues, we basically have 60 days to take an action. And so I think that we might be able to straddle having a potential appointed board member interviewed prior to the actual session, and there might be ability to address that, which is clearly valid. We've been putting this off for so long because I guess one of the things we just have to learn is that there's always change and transition, and when you least expect it, you just think you got yourself nicely settled, and you know, these things, this is just the one constant, is always change. So I think it is important to take that into consideration. I do think we can manage it just based on the time constraints that we're under anyway, myself. Let me see if there are any more board comments. And then I will go to the public. Okay. There are no public comment. So would someone like to make the motion?
I'll make a motion if I can.
It's your
So I
turn.
recommend that we, yeah, right. We approve budget authority for the general manager or her designee to enter into an agreement with Rouch Communication Consultants Incorporated for a not to exceed amount of $13,000 to facilitate a strategic planning process and develop a strategic plan.
I will second the motion. And I'll start with roll. Vice President Natoli.
Yes.
Director Saraswat.
Yes.
Director Deppie.
Yes.
And I vote yes, so the motion carries 4-0. And now we're at the section of our agenda for general director comments. And I would like to use this opportunity just to, again, say that it's really important, I believe, that we convene a special meeting for addressing the vacancy on the board. I'd like to, I don't know that we will be able to actually set this right now in public, but I mean, we'll have to set it. And I would like to find out if any board members have dates that they're just absolutely not available within the next, let's say, week or so. Yeah, it would be helpful to know.
I cannot do in the next week. I'm sorry.
At all.
No, I have a son graduating from college and
I guess when would you be, what's the first day you would be available?
Next Friday.
Okay.
You want to do next Friday night? Otherwise, I could say the 25th would be a possibility.
Okay. All right. Anyone else? It's okay. That's why I'm asking. Anyone else have dates that are absolutely not possible? Okay. I mean, I'm hoping to accommodate all of us.
The first week, well, it doesn't really start in June, but that week where June starts, I'm not available.
All right. I think we'll be able to manage something between the 25th or next Friday and on. We'll just take a look at that. And is there any reason why people couldn't meet in the daytime, or are there any hours I have a lot of flexibility. Are there any hours within that would not work for people in the daytime?
Which week, Sylvia?
I don't know quite yet. I guess beginning next Friday through, Chris, when's the first day that you're no longer available?
That would be the, looks like say the 31st Monday.
Starting, so no longer after the 31st and on.
Well, that week, yeah, so a week from then on, right.
Okay, so looking somewhere between next Friday and that week, Eileen, are there any dates that would be not good?
There's certain days that I might have something, but actually that week is pretty clear until Thursday.
Okay. Rachel, do you have any constraints just in general during the days?
Yeah, I do. I have, yeah, I mean, I might have some time midday. So right now, usually I'll just say from about 1 to 5 every day is pretty booked up.
Okay.
So I can arrange a morning or I can do an early evening.
Okay. We'll keep that in mind, and maybe we can just go ahead and stick to evenings. I just wanted to make sure that if days were possible, we would see. So I think we'll have to probably do a doodle poll, but we'll put a lot of choices out there and just come up with the one that the most people can go to. But we do have to take action. So if I have, 3 out of 4 and we can't get any other days, we may have to just do with that, because we held off on a special meeting we didn't get consensus. I was really accommodating everybody, and I don't know that we have that luxury this time. So we'll do what we can to get everybody on into one meeting. I think we can manage. It seems to be enough there. So we'll make it happen, I hope. So keep an eye out for that, and we'll come to something on that. That's all I really wanted to say right now. Anyone else have any other comments or things to raise? I think I would also say that I've gotten quite a bit of interest from some residents around composting. I continue to get emails, and just wanted to bring that up. I'm talking to residents a lot about that. Okay, if there are no other board, go ahead.
It's a comment about the comments, and I know we used to have this at the beginning of the meeting, the board comments and general manager's comments, and it feels like that would be the more appropriate place to put it, just because you never really know what we're going to say. And normally it's not too momentous, but sometimes there's announcements that we make that are of interest to the public. And I think it's a pity if the public has to wait the whole meeting to hear this, because everything else on the agenda, they know what's going to happen. So it would probably be more convenient for the public if we had our comments at the beginning, and if someone then didn't want to hear or wasn't interested in anything else, they could leave. So right now, people have to stick around for the whole meeting to hear what we may or may not say. Now, whether that's a good or bad thing, I don't know, but it seems a bit more convenient that our comments would go at the beginning than at the end. That's my comment.
Thanks. I think some of that was around spending less time, taking less time for folks who are making presentations, who may not be, who may be contractors or things like that, and also just to get through the business, which sometimes can go really late into the evening. So that's generally why this format is followed. It's actually done in a lot of jurisdictions, so we're not used to doing it this way, and that's why we're doing it. I think we can certainly take it under advisement and see if I think any director, if they feel like they have something really important as the agenda is being developed, should always raise that with either me or the general manager. Okay. Anything from the general manager as far as comments go?
Just very quickly, I just wanted to mention to people that many people already know, but if you don't, that we've launched a general manager monthly update, and you can sign up for that on the district's homepage. On the front page is a sign up sheet for signing up for that. We will continue twice a year to do a hard copy, which I'll be working on that after the budget in July. That will go out as it has gone out in the past, try to do 2 of those a year. And then lastly, I just wanted to remind everybody that, the first budget workshop with the board will be June 10th. And then there will be a public budget workshop that staff will run on Thursday, June 17th. And then, as was approved earlier this evening, there'll be a special meeting just for the budget only, hopefully for approval on Tuesday, June 29th. Thank you.
Okay, and with that, we are concluding our meeting. I want to thank all the members of the public for joining us, our staff, our contractors who presented, and of course, my fellow board members for their time and service. And we'll be in touch to arrange a special meeting. Good night, everybody.